In this Fextralife video, I'm going to be showing you guys Phantom Brigade. This is a turn-based tactical RPG. I use the term RPG kind of loosely here because it has some RPG mechanics, as you will see, but I'm not sure I would call it a proper RPG the way that you're thinking. And this game was actually released on both Epic and Steam in 2023, and it's been gaining popularity because of the constant improvements and tweaks the developers have been making to the game over the past 2 years. And if you take a look at Steam, you can actually see that it's jumped from 75% all time to 87% recently, which is a quite substantial increase. In this video, I'll be showing you what Phantom Brigade is and why it reminds me a lot of something like XCOM if you combined it with Armored Core or maybe Mech Warrior. And I'll also be touching on the massive 2.0 update that was just released today for the game that overhauls a lot of the game's mechanics, streamlines some of the gameplay, and some of the things we're going to be discussing in this video will showcase these new 2.0 aspects of the game. Before we get into it though, big shout out to Brace Yourself Games for sponsoring this video. If you guys like what you see in the video and you want to pick up Phantom Brigade, it's actually 50% off on Steam for the next 2 weeks at $14.99, and you can use our link below to support the channel. So what is Phantom Brigade? This is a game that I had never heard of before, which is quite shocking because after I played it, I really found myself thinking that it reminds me of XCOM in all the best ways. It has turn-based combat. I am a huge fan of turn-based combat that's highly tactical, and it pits you and your pilots and mechs against enemies in a variety of different scenarios, and it has a very, very XCOM-like feel to it. And XCOM is such a fantastic game. If you've never played it before, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So the fact that this game is even reminding me of that game at all is already a step in the right direction for this title. Now, there are two big distinctions that separate Phantom Brigade from games like XCOM, and those are the prediction technology and, of course, the mechs themselves, customizing the mechs. We'll talk about the prediction technology first because this is like one of the big draws of the game. And it's a really interesting mechanic because it's not a true turn-based game in the sense that all you do is move and attack, and the enemies take turns and you take turns, etc., like you would see in a typical tactical turn-based game. Instead, what's happening is you're commanding your forces, you're queuing up movements, attacks, and actions, and then you're watching them play out over the next 5 seconds while the enemy plays out their 5 seconds simultaneously. So if you plan on running left and shooting a mech that's gonna, move to the right with one mech, and then moving and getting line of sight with your sniper mech so that the other mech is, not behind the building when you time your shot so it's not being blocked. There's a lot of tactical nature to the game, and it plays out in a real-time format where your and the enemy's turns happen simultaneously over these 5 seconds, and then you repeat this process. And when I first started playing it, I will say that it was quite overwhelming to begin with. The game's throwing at you a lot of mechanics as you're learning how to use this, prediction technology in the game. You're learning like what pilot traits are, what the classes do, how to build mechs, what mech building is, and how to, get more weapons and upgrade those. So trying to get a hang of all the mechanics of the game simultaneously while learning something that's kind of foreign, because this is not something you would have in your typical tactical RPG, is a bit overwhelming when you first start playing the game. And I began to wonder, actually, early on, if it was actually a hindrance to the game or if it was a boon to the game that they had this system, because I was like, why don't, it'd just be simpler if you just move and attack. But the more I played the game, the more I started to understand what really makes it unique. And once it clicked and all the things fell into place, it is a lot of fun to really take turns and watch them play out in real time and then do it again and do it again. It's kind of like, I don't know, if you and your opponent were playing chess, but you're both moving your pieces at the same time. It's a little less chaotic than that, but it's really fun to do. And it really just begins there from the tactical nature. That's like the basics of it. But combat is not just about the decisions that you're making in combat, which is obviously a huge part of that, but it's also about how you have your pilots, how you have your mechs set up, and how much time you spend customizing and tweaking them outside of combat to set you up for success inside of combat. So let's talk about that a little bit. So each time you go on a mission, you're going to be deploying your pilots and you'll be deploying your mechs. And you can mix and match your mechs with your pilots however you want every time if you want. They are not the same unit, which is obviously, again, very different than XCOM. But pilots have their own unique classes that give them traits and abilities that are somewhat randomized. so that you're not always having the same, if you have like a sharpshooter, that's not always the same sharpshooter. It's going to have different traits and stuff like that. And this is actually one of the new additions to the 2.0 update. And, being able to level up your pilots and get random traits and the different abilities is one of the new things added to the game. And it definitely makes for some very interesting synergies between you and your mechs, your pilots and your mechs. For instance, if you have a defender pilot, picking a mech that can absorb damage, like setting it up with medium parts or heavy parts, will fit better than perhaps a light mech, because they're going to gain bonuses that make them tankier. So absorbing damage is what they're going to want to do. If you're always on the back line being a light mech and you're never absorbing damage, being a defender doesn't make much sense for you. However, if you are playing as like a sharpshooter, one of your pilots is a sharpshooter, outfitting them with a sniper rifle or a long-range weapon like rockets works really well, since they tend to gain increased damage at longer ranges. So setting them up with maybe a light mech and some long-range weapons so they can move around quickly and get in position and fire those works really well. And if you're familiar with XCOM, you should be kind of familiar with how these classes work and their abilities and things like that. They're very, very similar to that game. And as your pilots perform in missions and take down enemies, they'll gain new abilities and random traits, and it will influence what they further excel at in combat with a general theme based on their class. And once you actually hit level 6, you can actually take one of the random traits you've gained, keep it, and then start the process over again with more random traits. So as you keep leveling up, you'll keep gaining more and more random traits, which is something that is, helps you gain more and more progression as you progress through the game. And I mentioned earlier that there are two major distinctions: the prediction technology, and obviously the mechs is something that really sets this game apart from other tactical strategy games out there. And outfitting your mechs, salvaging parts from other mechs you face in combat is a big part of the game. You have to make decisions about what you salvage. You can't salvage everything. And you almost always are tweaking something between each and every encounter. And whether you're replacing a weapon on one of your mechs or an armor part, you're going to be balancing your mass, your heat, and speed. And all of these are huge parts of the capabilities of any given mech in combat. And it's something that seems simple at first. The larger your mech, if you collide with another mech, you tend to knock them down instead of being knocked down. Your heat determines how frequently you can use your weapons and abilities in combat before you need to let them cool down, or you're going to damage yourself and hurt your pilot and your mech. And your speed is basically how far you can move in a given amount of time. So the faster your mech, the more you can close the distance on your enemies, or maybe you can create separation from your enemies if you're a longer range mech. All these things need balancing, and these are simple mechanics, but when you combine them with all the different weapons, the weight of the armor or mech pieces that you're wearing can determine your speed, mixing and matching medium, light, and heavy pieces, and matching them with pilots that have combat abilities that make sense for those weapon types. It gets really, really complex quickly, and it's simple to understand, but it takes a really long time to master it, and you have to play many, many hours before it really starts clicking for you. One of the mistakes I made really early on with my mechs was that I would just start equipping them with the strongest weapons I could find, because the system in this game has kind of like a rarity system, if you will. You have your gray, your normal, and then you have like green that have a little bit more upgrades, and there are perks on these as well as you get green that like further give you passive benefits, and they have different perks that these pieces can come with. And then you can get blue, and blue can come with even more perks, and you can get actually like upgrades to these parts that like reduce your heat or increase your mass, or other things as well. And it can get really complicated. But one of the mistakes I made was just putting my best weapons, like strongest weapons I got every time on my mechs, and then I would go out and they would fire them and they would overheat constantly because I didn't manage my heat and I just went for raw damage. And when I was first playing the game, I would just attack as many times in combat as I could, and I didn't realize you have to use your timeline to space out your attack so heat reduces in between. And it gets really, really interesting when you put all these things together. And I think the game without some of these pieces would be very, very simple, but when you combine all these together into one tactical game, there's a lot of things to consider even outside of combat that you can spend a lot of time tinkering, and I really, really enjoy that. You can also paint your mechs, name them custom names, and change like things about them, and I really like that as well. You can do the same with your pilots. You can change them too if you want to give them a different call sign or a different name, etc. like that. It's really, really fun. So you can like put your friends in the game on your team with you, kind of like maybe something you do in other games as well. And outside of combat as well, you're also moving around with your mobile base, deciding what objectives to take on. Sometimes some will disappear before you can get to them, so you have to make decisions. They also have different difficulty ratings, so you can see like how hard they're going to be. And when you get into combat, you can decide how many pilots and mechs you want to deploy. If you want to just deploy a couple, they're going to gain XP more quickly. But if you want to deploy more, they'll spread the XP out more evenly, so they'll level up slower, but everyone will gain some XP. And you have a fatigue mechanic, so your pilots need to rest from time to time. They also have their own HP from being in combat. So there is a rest system in the game where you need to rest periodically by camping. That will replenish some of your mechs, like durability, and some of the health of your pilots and fatigue as well. So you have to manage that. So there are other things too outside of combat. And as you complete more and more missions, you'll open up more and more regions of the game, allowing you to travel to different areas. And there are quite a few of them as well. So you're going to be like, you know, clearing one region, moving to the next region, clearing that region, making decisions as you come across things like salvage this or don't salvage that, or help these people or don't. And there are going to be ramifications of those decisions. And that's also another thing that was added in the 2.0 update, is that there have been more quests added to the game, more random encounters added to the game, more missions. So if you played before, it should feel a little bit more new and fresh. And there is also a workshop inside of your mobile base that allows you to craft new mechs, allows you to craft parts that you've salvaged, allows you to upgrade parts, allows you to increase the amount of pilots that you can have, amount of mechs you can field. Other passive upgrades that, you know, apply to your whole team are there as well as you progress the game and gain more components and materials. So there is even more progression to be had as a group outside of combat. So that kind of wraps up our video on Phantom Brigade, and this is a game that if you're looking for something that's kind of XCOM-like in nature, you haven't found anything that scratched that itch since XCOM, definitely recommend maybe checking out Phantom Brigade. It has a bit of that mech warrior / armored core in it as well, so if you're someone who likes to tinker with mechs and mech games, it's got some of that in there too. And as I mentioned, the 2.0 update comes out today, and it has a lot of quality of life improvements, including new missions, new encounters, character customization in terms of progression for the classes and their traits, and a few other things as well. So if you're going to be playing right now, you're going to be playing the best version of the game. And this is not an expensive game. It's normally $29.99. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, currently for the next 2 weeks, it's actually on sale for $14.99. So you're getting a really good deal on this game. And the game is supposedly 30 hours long as well. I haven't played through the whole game, so I can't confirm whether this is true or not. But if you just look at the overworld map that shows you all the regions of the game, I could definitely believe this statement. And even if you get 5 hours less at like 25 hours or something like that, $14.99 for a 25-hour game is still a good deal. And this game seems to be really polished too from what I've played so far. It looks pretty, it runs well. I didn't have any FPS drops, I had no crashes, I had no bugs in my time playing. The load times were fast. So if you want to support the channel and this seems like something that you might want to check out, you can use our link below to pick up Phantom Brigade, and I hope you guys enjoy it.